How are these things transmitted? So, I mean, you talked about social distancing a little bit ago, but, how should people react? And the big bugaboo, do masks work? I mean, should we all be wearing masks between November and April?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you may still see people wearing masks out there. Some people wear masks when I as an infectious disease specialist, I go, you don't really need to outside. However, some people may be wearing masks because they are immunocompromised, and I do not know that. And so it's a personal decision or a decision that was recommended by their healthcare provider. The way to prevent most of these, transmission can occur through contact, through things called fomites. This table is a fomite. This microphone is a fomite. Fomite is an inanimate object that we touch, that somebody else touches their eyes or their nose, and easily transmits. One of my all-time favorite movies that I saw pre-COVID, and I saw it smack dab in the middle of COVID, is the movie Contagion. I don't work for that film studio, but great film. And in the first few minutes, the characters were in the airport and the camera was following hand movements of a credit card, going from touching the keyboard on the credit card, touching the credit card, the person getting the card, touching their glass, the waiter grabbing the glass, taking it back, and then people touching their noses and their eyes. Ever since COVID, I think I've gotten way better at being mindful of how often my hand goes to my nose or my eyes. So that tends to be a very common way to transmit. But I don't want you to get the impression that we have to spray everything down to prevent infections. But hand washing is so underdone and undervalued because a lot of how we get sick is from contamination of the things that we use to touch things that ultimately find their way in our food or in our eyes and our nose. So that's number one. If you really want to limit the spread, is frequent hand washing. And then also the social distancing. The majority of respiratory viruses are within 3 to 6 feet. They're called droplet precautions. Droplets are these particles that we emit even while I'm talking. If we had a strobe light, you will see particles coming out of our mouths that ultimately float in the air and then start to drop between 3 to 6 feet. We're at a pretty good distance that if I had influenza, you probably won't get it. But influenza is a little bit aerosolized. So if there was a rush of wind here, some of those particles can find their way and then they attach to your nose. So long story short, when people are sick, if most people who are sick stay at home, then the number of people who get sick every year would decrease. And I think I mentioned this earlier on. It is worth noting that there was hardly any influenza worldwide during the first year of the COVID pandemic. And that's a testament to a variety of factors: less people traveling, a lot of social distancing, a lot of people being more attentive to hand washing, and then masks. Masks definitely do work. When the data is done on an individual basis, the better the masks, the better the protection. N95s, KN95s. Surgical masks tend to be pretty good for a lot of these wimpier viruses, including influenza, because they're intended to capture the particles that are coming out of a person's mouth to prevent transmission to others. So if somebody were at home and they say, what can I do to prevent my elderly grandfather who is getting chemo and has a solid organ transplant and is really immunocompromised, stay as far away from them as possible. But can you be within the same room? You potentially can, but at a farther distance. And a mask can further diminish that, and then frequent hand washing and so forth. But again, it's worth noting that most of us, myself included, as an infectious disease specialist, I have always been not as mindful of infection control until COVID occurred, because the mortality and the stakes were higher. And so when people became very attentive to that, it certainly works. Now that COVID is not quite in the rearview mirror, but it's becoming more manageable, there's a significant percentage of us that are immune, so therefore we have protection from that angle. If we relax a lot of those things, are these viruses returning? Yes. So there's the trifecta of COVID, flu, and RSV. So they're occurring because people are like, yay, I can go back to the restaurants and and people want to do that. So the trade-off is, can I now get more infections? But if you really want to play by the rules, and you want to limit the exposure to others, then staying away. And specifically for influenza, if you get treated with Tamiflu, by day 5, you're no longer contagious. If you're not treated with Tamiflu or oseltamivir, by day 7, you're no longer contagious. Now, some people who have weakened immune system can shed virus for a little longer. And so those are people who may be spreading it for just a little bit longer than that.
Hey folks, connecting with your benefits is our primary mission, and the SITREP is providing more options than ever.
Subscribe to our free email newsletter, subscribe to our audio podcast channel, or subscribe to our content on YouTube.
For details and links, check out the description below.